Hello, I'm back with round 2 from the 2025 Maia Open. So if you missed the first video, I introduced the tournament there, but I managed to win the first round game after a bit of adventure. For the second game, I was paired against a Spanish 2100, Miguel Soto, and I was playing black. So the game started d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight f3, bishop g7. I go for the King's Indian, my favorite, g3. And so white indicates that they're playing the fianchetto variation. So I didn't have a lot of preparation for this game because I don't think I could find a ton of games that my opponent had, at least in recent years. A lot of his games were from much earlier, if I remember correctly. So I didn't really have a lot to go on in this game, and I remember not really expecting the G3 system against the King's Indian. I'm not even sure I knew what my opponent's first move was going to be, in fact, but if I recall from the prep. But anyways, I go for this C5 system, and I believe I picked this up from Gawain Jones in his chessable repertoire. He recommends a lot of these lines against the fianchetto. And I decided to just start with C5 here, just to see if my opponent would push d5. Not sure if this is the best move order to go for this line, but if white plays d5 in this position, I think I could start with d6, and then let's say if castles b5 is known to be pretty interesting here, as far as I can remember, kind of like Benko Gambit style play. Maybe I could even play b5 right away. I think this is also possible here. In the game, I think I probably would have just thrown out b5, because if I go d6, white of course can play like knight c3, and then I think we just transpose into the classic fianchetto Benoni. So white castled instead. I play d6, knight c3, knight c6. So this is like a pretty main line for this variation. Here white goes d5. D takes c5 is another move that leads to let's say more quieter positions, but d5 is pretty sharp because now knight a5 we get this kind of Benoni structure. And I've played this a couple times before, so I was feeling pretty much okay here. Knight d2, I went e6, and here white goes rook to b1. So there's a couple moves for white. I think rook b1 is totally fine. I think maybe queen c2 here is the main move, and generally we get a structure that looks like this, and black tries to play for b5, and white plays in the center, and pretty complicated. White can't really go b3 here so easily because of knight takes d5, and black wins material along the diagonal. So that is the point of rook to b1, to just kind of prepare b3. And here I took c takes d5, and then I spent a bit of time and I played bishop f5 here. So at this point, like, I wasn't expecting this line. I couldn't quite remember if I'd prepared this exact position or not. I knew like queen c2 is the main move, but rook to b1, I wasn't sure exactly what the theory here is. And so I decided on this move, bishop f5, which is pretty thematic for this position. The idea being that black kind of provokes e4 and then drops back bishop to d7, and then in the future white isn't able to use this e4 square for one of their knights, which sometimes they want to do. So definitely a controversial decision, but I think it was reasonable in this position. I could also start with bishop to d7 or rook to e8. I think rook e8 may be the engine's top choice here, from what I checked, and then just playing like bishop d7 and b5, and it's a pretty normal position. But I start with bishop f5, e4, bishop to d7, and now white goes queen c2. Really, he should have just played b3 right away. There's nothing I can really do on the diagonal. If I go b5, bishop to b2, I think this position, maybe even white is a bit better here, like b4, the knight goes to e2. But black has moves as well, like rook e8, I'll put the bishop on b5, rook c8, play for c4 somewhere. I think white's a bit better, but it feels very reasonable for black. So queen c2. And now I decided to go b5, but I really should have played c4, and this is kind of the main move I was thinking about. c4 would also be the move, like if white were to play a4 here, which I think is actually a strategic mistake. Then after c4, I think black is doing absolutely fine. And the point is just hard for white to develop without playing b3 or b4, but in either case I'll take on b3, knight takes b3, and then, for example, I think knight c4 here is best, but black has like rook c8 to follow up, rook e8. Basically, the knight on a5 gets fixed. Knight on c4 is now quite good. The bishop is open, and it's basically a very reasonable version of the Benoni that black gets here, even though we haven't traded off any minor pieces, but all of black's pieces are, I think, quite decent. So on queen c2, as played in the game, I really should have just played c4 anyway. And then on b4, let's say takes. I wasn't totally sure about this position because my knight stays sidelined, but it turns out it's totally fine for black. So rook c8, bishop to b2, for example, and then I can play like queen b6, I can play b5, knight g4, like black has a lot of moves here, and it's quite okay. So I went b5, b3, rook e8, just kind of normal move, and now knight to d1. So knight d1 I thought definitely a very good idea, because eventually black is probably going to play b4 here and kick the knight, so the knight kind of reroutes itself to e3. And now if I ever play c4, white will kind of shut me down with b4. And then I have a bad knight that has to go to b7. Now probably this is what I should have done anyway. Like after b4, knight b7, at least I can follow up with a5 here and like activate the rook on a8. But yeah, to my eyes, it felt like a difficult position. So instead I played rook c8. And yeah, I was expecting bishop to b2 here, which I thought was the most likely move. Where again, if I play c4, white has b4. And I really wouldn't want to go knight b7 here, but if I played c3, I wasn't sure if I'm getting enough for this sacrifice. So knight takes c3, for example, I go knight c4. In the game, I actually didn't realize that this would be fine for me. Like rook takes c4. I'm hitting both pawns, essentially, because knight e4 is a threat due to the pin on the c file. And I'm hitting b4. I think maybe white can defend both with like queen b3, getting out of the pin. But yeah, here black does have reasonable compensation, it would seem. There's h5, there's a5. There's a lot of decent moves here. It turns out, though, I didn't really think about this during the game. White could take with the bishop, and then here white would have pretty much a pretty serious advantage. I don't think black has enough for the pawn. So like knight c4, for instance, rook takes, knight to e3, and already my rook has to drop back. I can consider the exchange sack like rook c3, knight e4, but it doesn't seem to be totally enough here. Like I have some pretty pieces, but well, white's rooks aren't that bad either on the E and C files here. So here I think white would have still a big advantage. So definitely white should have played bishop b2, and I'm not sure I would have played c4. Maybe a more flexible move like h5 is better, just kind of leaving my options open and seeing how white deals with this. And then basically in my mind, I just didn't want to play c4 unless I had a good answer to b4, which for the moment black doesn't. But then the opponent surprised me. He goes knight to e3. And this is surprising because it seems to allow c4 under good circumstances. So I played it. And I don't think I spent too much time on it. I was just, 2 minutes. Because now on b4, then I'm pushing c3, and it's not a pawn sacrifice. This pawn is just kind of surviving. And if knight b3, for example, I get knight c4, and so now black is doing great. If white takes the pawn, then of course we can take on e4 or on d5. The diagonal opens up, and that's going to be really bad. So all of a sudden, after c4 is allowed, I felt very good here. I have a huge threat. C takes b3, just winning material, and c3 is kind of a positional threat. So white takes, and here I decided to take with the pawn, which probably wasn't correct. Like, it's much more logical to take with the knight because black wants to trade off a pair of pieces. And that was my first instinct, but then I also thought it's kind of helping white trade off one of his knights, which are kind of awkward and a little bit in the way of the bishop. But nevertheless, I think this would have been the position I should go for. Takes, let's say bishop a3, and just queen c7, just defending this pawn, keeping this pawn protected. And yeah, soon black is going to push c3, and black is clearly better. Just this pawn is very, very strong. So that was simple and straightforward, but I decided to take with the pawn. Now comes rook to b4, which surprised me again. I thought bishop to b2 was maybe the most logical move, but of course on bishop b2, I would play c3, and then white has to make sure that they're not losing material here. And I don't think it's terrible for white after bishop takes c3. Unfortunately, I can't take either of these because a knight recaptures and then defends the bishop on c3. So basically, I'm just losing material in either case. Knight takes d5, knight d5. But I do have knight g4, which is annoying because I hit the knight and I hit the bishop on c3. White would have to play knight d1. Let's say queen c7 piling up, and yeah, I think black has very decent compensation here. So this is kind of what I was intending. And in the game, I didn't think super deeply here. I was just like, all right, it'll figure itself out. Because in this position, yeah, you just have to go c3. It's pretty much the only move. But okay, pawn rook to b4, we don't really get this. Now black just gets c3 in for free. knight b3, I took, takes, then went queen a5, rook c4, bishop b5. So here I started feeling really good about my chances because felt like everything is activating itself. Queen, bishop comes out. White's forced to take here. I take with the rook. Rook on f1 is hit, so rook to d1. And yeah, at this point I kind of felt like it's a key moment during the game. I should mention I have a huge time advantage at this point, so 36 minutes against 6 minutes. It's move 23, so 17 moves to make to the time control where we get an extra 30 minutes. But 6 minutes for the opponent is not a lot of time to make 17 moves in a difficult position, because it seems like black is clearly better. The pawn on c3 is really strong, and white has to defend this. So yeah, I was really trying to essentially win the game here before the time control, because I felt like I should have good chances. And yeah, I wasn't quite sure like what white's next move was going to be here, even because white doesn't really have a lot of useful moves. Bishop on c1 is kind of stuck. Rook isn't really going anywhere. Knight's not going anywhere. Bishop's not like. So I wasn't really sure what white wants to do. And after some thought, I ended up playing queen to b4. And actually didn't spend a ton of time on this one. Only a minute and a half. And I really wish I spent more time, because I do allow white something to do. Now he gets queen a2. And my last move, queen b4, just gave up the square, which I didn't notice before I made the move. But now it's a little bit annoying because like bishop a3 is coming, and also white wants to play knight c2 with tempo with the blockade, and my queen on b4 doesn't seem to be so well placed anymore. My other idea with queen b4 is that I wanted to play a5, a4. So if white does nothing, I can just break through and win the game with the c pawn. But allowing this was not very wise. So what should I have done instead? A couple other moves. I think knight d7 is maybe the most natural move. Just opening up the bishop and preparing to transfer the knight to somewhere better. And yeah, it's up to white to kind of figure out what to do. I think the engine was suggesting rook e8 here, which wasn't really on my mind at all in this position, probably throughout the game, because I just assumed my rook is good on the c file, right? So I should just keep it there. But there is some point to just putting pressure on the e-pawn and making it really difficult for white to move either of his pieces, probably provoking white to play f3, which is weakening, and then going knight d7 and maybe eventually bringing the rook back somewhere where it's more useful now. But yeah, this inducing the move f3 definitely feels like would be in black's favor. So that would have been better. In any case, I go queen to b4. White plays queen a2. And here I started to tank, because now I realized, okay, I've just allowed something, bishop a3, knight c2. And whenever I miss something, I try to spend time at that moment so that I don't continue to miss stuff by playing quickly. But now I really wasn't sure what to do, because bishop a3 and knight c2 are coming. And I guess the most natural move would be queen c5, just kind of pulling back. And then I just didn't really like that I'm going backwards. Bishop a3 here, I'd have to drop back, and maybe knight c2 here, for example. And looking at it now, it's like this position is still good for black, which is where I went wrong, is that I thought like, okay, I'm going backwards, so that's not correct. I should find something more active to do. But the position is still decent, you know, just because you have to like kind of reroute a bit doesn't mean that you don't have the same advantages as you used to. So like the c pawn is still very, very strong here. I have ideas like knight g4, queen to b6. Like white has other difficulties as well. Now the f2 pawn is kind of a target. So yeah, I really kind of underestimated this position from black's point of view. And I spent time trying to make it work, but I also wasn't sure, like, you know, queen c5, I guess knight c2 was a bit bothersome, but here there's knight g4, which I just didn't really see during the game, that I'm hitting this one. And yeah, white doesn't have a great response here. Bishop b3, I'm just taking the all-powerful dark square bishop, and yeah, my bishop should lead to a decisive advantage. So long story short, I found this very tempting idea to push c2, which is a very thematic move in these positions, just like push the pawn and try to get something for it. Of course, I'm giving up the pawn, but yeah, I had a pretty deep idea in mind. On knight c2, I go queen c3, hitting the knight. So knight e3 was played, which I thought is most logical, and my intention here was to sacrifice the queen. Queen takes c1. And basically I calculated for some time. So on c2, I calculated for like 13 minutes, mostly trying to make this work because I didn't like queen to c5. And yeah, my point was after takes, white blocks on f1 with something, bishop f1, knight f1 was also possible. And then I think I was mainly looking at this line, knight takes e4, with various intentions. There's like knight c3 and knight e2 check, but mainly at some point I want to bring the knight to d2 and just win a second piece on f1. Because right now black has a rook and one minor piece for the queen, which usually isn't enough. But if I win a second piece by playing knight d2, then I'd have rook and two pieces for the queen, which would be quite a bit. So I was kind of looking at these lines. I looked at a very deep line here, like queen takes a7, bishop f1, knight d2, let's say like queen b8 check, bishop f8, king g2, rook takes f1. I was looking very deep here, like b4, and trying to make sure that I could stop the pawn, because that's what I was thinking, is like, okay, I'm gonna get like queen versus three pieces, white get this b pawn, can I stop the b pawn? If I can stop the b pawn, so let's say something, I think I even like saw this position in my mind. Like the knight goes to c5, and here I was like, okay, I've stopped the pawn, and this should probably be winning for black because I have like rook and three pieces. Engine actually says even this position is white's holding. After queen c7, queen a7, I don't have a way to make progress. But there was better stuff there. The point was that my calculation was just all over the place. And in any case, white goes bishop f1. And I'd seen this from afar, and I had knight g4 as my intention, where if white takes on g4, I have bishop takes f1, and this is extremely dangerous for white's king. So if f3, for example, is just immediately getting mated, like bishop d4 check, followed by moving this one. So white would have to go like queen d2, and then I had this idea in mind, rook to b1, where now if f3, then I move the bishop, the king goes to the second rank, rook b2, I win the queen, and I have an extra piece. So I saw a lot of these lines like that that worked for me, but white with 2 minutes finds queen d2 in this position, so I think that was an accurate move, hitting the rook. And now if I go rook to b1, he can continue like chasing me with queen c2. And I'm just not quite in time to win material yet. So I have to go to a1. And then here came the shock, knight c4. And this move just like completely escaped me. Like I didn't see it when I was calculating from here, pushing c2. I didn't see it when I spent a couple minutes at this point looking at knight to g4, because I thought maybe I have other options here as well. This knight c4 defense just completely evaded my attention, and now I'm in trouble. Now I'm in trouble because I'm not getting the second piece. Now I have rook and one minor piece against the queen, and it's completely unclear, but like d6 is weak, the queen can come in at some point. So now I'm actually just in serious trouble, and I didn't manage to kind of survive, or to really just come away here with a fight. I did the best I could. I took here, I go rook to b1, trying to play rook b2 and bishop d4 and getting counterplay against f2, but queen g5 hits the knight, I go h5, he gives check, plays h3, knight drops back, king to g2, basically like very, very good technique from white at this point. King g2 getting out of the back rank, out of the pin. Now the d6 pawn is falling. If rook to b6, I'm not really holding this in the long run, like queen e7, for example, and then he's going to push c5. So at this point, okay, I played rook a1, just looking for any chances I could get. So queen takes d6, I push a5, but white's just too fast here. c5, a4, he brings his queen behind, c6, a2. This was all played leading up to the time control, but yeah, white's moves were pretty much straightforward to find here. Now c7, second queen is coming. I played here, takes, and yeah, I tried to hold this position for a little bit, but ultimately I wasn't able to. Just f4, e5 immediately. I decided to sack here, basically hoping to build some kind of blockade or fortress on the dark squares, but yeah, ultimately I didn't really believe in it, and my opponent just kind of slowly broke things down with very straightforward technique. So here, queen c3 check. Now I'm provoked to push f6, because otherwise the queen comes into f6 with devastating effect. So I have to weaken myself with f6 here. Queen a5, rook d7, queen b5. And here I resigned because it's pretty much over. White's queen is getting in. If I drop back to d8, then queen b7 check, followed by bishop takes g6, and that's game over. If I go to c7 or e7, White essentially just has some very simple attacks to kind of force me to break down my defense. So here and here, for example, queen c6 check, and again g6 falls. And then, yeah, same thing on rook e7, just queen c6, and I'm losing the fortress here. So yeah, very unfortunate loss. I feel like I had a great position up until move 23, 24. And then here I made one slip with queen to b4. Then queen a2 happened, and in the game I didn't feel like I was like hardcore panicking. I still felt pretty confident pushing c2. I didn't think like, oh, I'm about to like lose this game. Like, I felt pretty good about c2. I didn't think I'm just like giving my queen for no reason, although that might be how this game looks to the outside observer. I truly believed, like, I thought I was winning with the queen sacrifice, but clearly I just miscalculated and misevaluated a lot of stuff. And perhaps even bigger mistake was just how much I underestimated the simple idea of just going back and resetting with queen c5, queen c7. So painful game for me, really difficult loss, but important lesson, like, about playing these kinds of positions, these Benoni positions. Very, very complicated, like a lot of dynamic factors. But yeah, really eye-opening, just like on the calculation part, just how badly I messed that part up, and misevaluating like a lot of the different Benoni positions for me was a big thing that went wrong in this game. Like, not knowing what kinds of structures and positions I should go for, which is understandable. Benoni is a difficult opening and structure to play, but yeah, that's definitely something where I could have done better. So unfortunately, after this game, I was on 1 out of 2, which in an open tournament like this already kind of spoils any kind of norm chances I might hope for. But of course, it wasn't the end of the tournament for me. I can definitely still bounce back and have a good result rating-wise. So that definitely became my goal for the next 7 rounds, which admittedly were quite interesting. So hopefully I'll see you back here for the next recaps. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.